Just in case you forgot why you were here, give it up for Dr. Cornel West. I have some pithy remarks that I want to share before I bring Dr. West to the stage, but just indulge me for a minute because I have to give some formal thank yous and some formal welcomes. If you just came in over the last 5 or 10 minutes, in the words of Jay-Z, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name's Dr. Glenn. I have the honor and pleasure of serving as the founder and the senior pastor of the Cultural Soul Project. And if you haven't been to our website or you don't know a lot about our ministry exists at the intersections of race, faith, hip hop, and justice, okay? I want to say one last thing. In 2011, Dr. West left Princeton University to go to Union Theological Seminary. And the irony about you going back to Union is that it was one of the first stops as you being a professor, and the president at that time was a former student of Dr. West. And I remember at the time, it was 2011, I was a vice president at a college, and I saw through the little cycle that Dr. West had just left Princeton. But the president at Union Theological Seminary said one of the best quotes that I ever heard about an academic, and I want to read it to you and to everybody here. I had to find this in the archives from 2011, and this was kind of tough, but I found it. The president of Union and former student of Dr. West said this about Dr. West. In coming here, Cornel West comes to a place where his scholarly commitments and activism don't live in two different worlds. As you get older, the more integrated your life is, the healthier it feels, and the less time you have to spend waking up deciding on who you're going to be that day. At Union, he just has to be Cornel. So when I brought Dr. West to the Cultural Soul Project, I don't care what you see on CNN, I don't care what you see on Democracy Now, I don't care what you see on Fox, I don't care what you see in any public space. When Dr. West comes to the Cultural Soul Project, he just has to be Cornel West. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Cornel West.
Well, that's got to be one of the most beautiful introductions I have ever received, though, brother. And I accept it with a humility, but also with a sense of amazement, because I would like to be the person you're talking about. But I do want to say this, though, brother, that my love for you, man, my respect for you is bottomless. That you're a special person with very special calling, very special ministry, and you are enacting it every day, every week, every month. 5 years ago, I think we were in the center, right? The convention center, I think it was, right before the pandemic. And I went away thinking, boy, this Brother Daymond, this Dr. Glenn, he is off the charts. But then when I met your mother, Peggy, where is she? Where's our... Stand up, stand up. Let's give it up for the mother. This is... Lord have mercy. You know, when you talk about Irene, you're talking about Peggy, too. That's where we come from. I'll never be one half of the human being my mother or my father, Clifton, was. I want to salute the First Lady, Sister Kira. Oh, indeed, indeed, indeed. We love you very much so. And where's Brother Noah? Where's Brother Noah? There, where's Nico? Where's Nico? There he is, the rest of the family. Sly say what? It's a family affair. And the brother with the wonderful brim on. Let's give it up for the family. Give it up for the family. There it is. Indeed, indeed, indeed. And to meet Brother Sean, though, oh my God, I'm telling you, it is really something that these Quakers, they got something quite deep going on the vanilla side of town, don't they? I have nothing against the Presbyterians, nothing against the Anglicans, nothing against the Baptists. I'm a Holy Ghost, hang loose, Black Baptist myself, even though my vanilla Baptists haven't got a lot of the memo when it comes to the gospel, but that's all right. We work with them and pray for them and pray with them. But there's something about the Quakers, the Underground Railroad, the money for Martin, the willingness to just be silent. That's a revolutionary act in America. Slow things down. The grace of being silent is not doing nothing. A whole lot is going on in that silence. Check yourself. Examine every corner, every nook and cranny of your soul, heart, and mind. And most importantly, be honest to the love and courage and integrity that's been poured into you by those who came before. See, we Baptists, we don't have a whole lot of quiet moments in our service. I was telling my dear brother Shaw, that silence is rich. Now we have deep prayer, especially when the right deacon gives it, or the right deaconess. But what we're really talking about comes out of the 6th chapter of Ephesians. How do we put on the whole armor? How do we fortify ourselves so we can fructify in our actions, being a force for good in the world, but not of it, against the grain of the world, not measuring yourself by the criteria of the world. Oh, what a great tradition. I also recognize I'm across the street from Reed College. Reed College produced 3 of the finest philosophic minds of my generation. Isn't that something? Georgia Warnke. I work on Gadamer and Hegel and Heidegger. Richard Wolins on Hegel and Heidegger and Gadamer. There's something about Reed College. They were tilted to German idealism and German philosophy at that time. I don't know where things are now. But they also produced one of the towering figures in the history of black intellectual life. His name was Steve Jameson, from the chocolate side of LA, South Central Los Angeles. And he was the first black graduate student in the history of MIT philosophy department. He spent a lot of time with Brother Steve, and he decided right in the middle of his program that he was going to join a monastery in Germany. And he's been there ever since. 50 years later, Brother Steve, still in the monastery. Let's give it up for Brother Steve James. From Reed College, Black LA, monastery, and reading philosophy every day. I mean, when I was teaching University of Paris, 1987, in Paris, right there in Saint-Denis, and he would send me notes from the monastery. It's 1987. And he's reading texts that I had just published 2 days before. And I said, Steve, nobody's even known that it was out. No, I'm on top of things. I said, oh, now why is that important? Well, that's important, again, because anytime we come to terms with how we fortify ourselves in order to fructify our sense of character, integrity, honesty, decency, perseverance, we need to have a sense of history, a sense of revolutionary piety. And that's what this grand congregation has. And what is revolutionary piety? Well, piety is the virtuous acknowledgement of the sources of good in your life in your brief trek from womb to tomb. So you have to acknowledge the degree to which You are falling back on not just figures, but arguments, visions, stories, narratives, deeds, memories that sustain you in your move toward the grave. Now, a lot of people conceive of piety as just uncritical obedience. No, we're not talking about that. Blind deference, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the critical acknowledgement of what has sustained you over time. The pastness in your present that allows you and fortifies you to go against the grain in the present to authorize a better future. The three dimensions of time, of past, present, and future. One of the problems of the American empire, of course, American empire is the 68th empire, the 70th empire since the beginning of the species. And every empire does what? Comes and goes. Every empire. Most of them come and go because of military overreach, corruption of elites at the top, sense of impotence among citizens, and the inability of citizens to gain access to the best of their past. And I think the only thing available in terms of options, the only thing available in terms of lives to live is what's poured out of the predominant institutions. And of course, for the United States these days, so much of it is not just market-driven and highly commodified culture, but they're forms of addiction and distraction tied to stimulation and titillation. So there's no time to think critically. There's no time to cultivate your soul and yourself and your character in such a way that you can straighten your back up with a vision different than that which is bombarding you every day by market-driven media. That's what is called a spiritual catastrophe. America is one of those civilizations and empires at our worst, because we'll talk about our best in a second. But at our worst, we confuse the catastrophic with the problematic. That's already a sign of deodorizing the funk. There's never been a race problem in America. There's been catastrophes visited upon indigenous peoples, visited upon enslaved, dignified Africans for 244 years, visited upon brown brothers and sisters whose land was taken away after they had taken away the land from the indigenous peoples. That's not a problem. That's a catastrophe. And one of the reasons why America likes to reduce the catastrophic to the problematic is because the problems are always so manageable given the status quo in place, rather than interrogating and questioning the status quo itself. So that success is measured as moving up in an unjust status quo, and you become an individual example of overwhelming breakthrough as you are well adjusted to injustice with a smile on your face. Look at me, I did so well. Yes, somebody sacrificing for you, struggling for you, opening doors for you, wind at your back. And spiritually, catastrophe is what? Well adapted to indifference. Indifference is the one trait that makes the very angels weep, says William James, who's the most adorable of all public philosophers in the history of this country. And the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel used to say, indifference, the evil is more insidious than evil itself. Callousness, coarse and conscious, chilly soul, don't care. It's what the great Dietrich Bonhoeffer calls socialized stupidity. Nothing wrong with being ignorant. All of us are ignorant, no matter how learned you become. It's just as in the language of Nicholas of Cusa, you have a form of learned ignorance. But stupidity is not being interested in knowing the truth. All of us have an ignorance because we don't have access to all the truth. Stupidity, you will to not know and then are proud of it. No empire, no society, no nation can survive with indifference, stupidity, tied to arrogance, condescension, haughtiness, and think that somehow this too will not pass. Think that somehow your empire will last forever. Or in the language of our dear brother Martin King, whose teacher Howard Thurman was so influenced by Rufus Jones and George Fox. No lie lives forever, truth crushed to earth will rise again. And what is the quest for truth? It ought to humble each and every one of us. It requires suffering to speak. The condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. In our individual lives, in our nation, any empire. And when you are pushing forms of suffering to the side and rendering them invisible, acting as if they can be silenced, you are on the road to sliding down a slippery slope to tyranny and chaos. And all we got to do these days is just turn on your television. Turn on your, I know some of you still have radios. I do. I'm a radio brother. That's why I'm on Brother Tavis's radio show, Truth Time, with Sister Nina Turner every day. We started January 6th with a different kind of insurrection. Spiritual, moral, political, tied to the past, rooted in the best. And all of us have our own particular tradition from whence we come. And we have to be honest and candid about that, because that's what we need now more than anything else. There's no way to be thoroughly, morally, and spiritually fortified if you are unacquainted with or not immersed in the best that has been poured into you. That's why it's so crucial to begin with Irene and Cliff and Cynthia and Cheryl and Clifton. Glenn Elder on the chocolate side of Sacramento, California. And Shiloh Baptist Church with Reverend Willie P. Cook from Brookhaven, Mississippi, who baptized me when I was 8 years old. And I intend to be faithful unto death. Oh, I made Jesus my choice. So I worked closely with the Black Panther Party right next door to the church, but could never join because you had to be an atheist to join. I love y'all brothers and sisters and siblings like I don't know what, but I'm a Jesus-loving free black man. So I bring with me what's inside of me. I'm not going to deny, I'm not going to crush what's inside of me. That's like telling me that I don't have a right to love Curtis Mayfield, or James Brown, or Aretha Franklin, or Luther Vandross, or Kendrick Lamar. We ain't got the Rhapsody yet. That's inside of me. I don't exist without those voices, those figures. And I come from a tradition of a black people, which is what? Lift every... Exactly. It's not lift every echo. America more and more just a culture of echoes, extensions of silos. People don't want to say what they mean and mean what they say. They want to pose and posture for their careers, their market strategy. Young folk come up to me all the time. Brother West, I love your brand. I say, what kind of brand you talking about? I ain't got no damn brand. I got a cause. I don't have a brand. Came here with black folk who were branded on those barbaric slave ships, taken to those barbaric slave auctions, put on those barbaric plantations, branded every generation for 244 years. Don't ask for my brand. I got a cause. A cause is something you'd live and die for. A cause is something that shot through you in the same way that your mama's milk and your grandfather's teaching you how to play baseball. That's inside of you at the deepest level. That's why when Jerry Butler dies, I shed tears. I remember Precious Love that he wrote when he was 16 years old with Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions. When Angie Stone dies, I shed tears. I remember her video with black men. We ain't even got to Roberta Flack yet. My God. Crucial figures, but all of them coming out of a tradition, and for me, the greatest tradition of the modern world. Artistic creativity, spiritual fortitude, and moral courage. That's black music. Never in the past 400 years have there been a people who have been so thoroughly hated every day and month and year, and yet teach the world so much about love. Here come John Coltrane, Love Supreme. How you do it, train. I can't do it without Johnny Hodges of the Duke Ellington Band. I can't do it without Hank Mobley. I can't do it without Gene Aumans. It's a tradition of a people who, in the face of overwhelming hatred, keep dishing out love warriors every generation. Love in the need of love. That's the genius from Saginaw, Michigan, isn't it? Stevie Wonder, Stephen Hardaway Hodgins. Just heard him at the funeral at Abyssinia Baptist Church for Roberta Flack and the songs he wrote for Roberta. Here come the love train and the OJs. Well, that's just a dance song. Check yourself. That's the same Gamble and Huff that wrote Only the Strong Survive with Jerry Butler as a teenager, tied to the stylistics and the Delphonics. Those are not just entertainers. Those are love warriors. And various forms of black music will reshape every culture, every people's, every nation's around the world in the last 150 years. It may be reduced to entertainment, but it is a form of black dignity and black sanity in the face of being bombarded with being viewed as black bodies being less beautiful, human beings less intelligent, black folk less moral, white supremacist bombardment. But in the face of all of that hatred, here comes a smile and some style. I noticed this at Charlottesville when I was with some of the sick white brothers. Sekou and myself and others went down there. Most of them were clergy. I'm not clergy. I'm just a pew-sitting kind of brother in the church. I'm not called like my brother to be a preacher or a pastor. I think I got too much gangster in me to. I really do. That's why I know Brother Trump is a dead-up, bona fide gangster. Because I got gangster in me, and a gangster can see a gangster. Nothing but a gangster until I met Jesus, and now I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. When I was there in Charlottesville, they show up with their guns and their ammunition and their masks, nothing but cowards. And I walked by the park, and they listening to Stevie Wonder. The genius of the music cuts so deep at the human level that even they can't deny the human connection, even though they hate the people who produced it. I mean, one of the folk walked up to me and told me, I see you on TV all the time. You one of those folk calling me brother all the time. I can't stand that. I said, you don't say, brother. See, I'm a freed black man. I don't ask for anybody's permission as to who I love, or how I laugh, or how I roll, or how I make it through time and space. I say, you choose to be a gangster. I'm doing so much better with my gangster proclivities than you. Shame on you. Then he pointed the gun at me. I said, I'm not afraid of you. Do you know what my folk have been through? Terrorized for 400 years, teach the world so much about freedom for everybody. Is that right, Frederick Douglass? Is that right, Harriet Tubman? Is that right, Sojourner Truth? Yes, it is, Brother West. Tell them. Lift my voice even though my body's not here. Traumatized for 400 years, here comes wounded healing, not just wounded hurting. Wrestling with depths of sorrow beyond any language, and yet all of this joy to come from a people who got a love and a freedom and a healing and a joy that the world didn't give us and the world can't take away. Could never crush us, never dampen our spirit. That's why in these times when I run into so many folks say, oh my God, fascism is here. I can't take it. I'm looking for the next plane to Portugal. It's true. I'm running into more and more black folk. Can't wait to get to Ghana. Everybody do their thing. I understand. I believe in freedom. But just know wherever you go or whether you stay here, if you're not fortified, you're still going to be in a mess. And you're still going to take your same self wherever you go. So if you don't get yourself together and go to Portugal, Portugal got a problem. True. And in many ways, most importantly, it's how do we pass on this great tradition to our precious young brothers and sisters of all colors, all genders, all sexual orientations, all religious and non-religious identities, so they have access to so much of the best, what the Greeks would call arete, A-R-E-T-E, the excellence. And every culture has it. It could be Dante in Italy. It could be Beethoven in Germany. It could be Diderot in France. It could be Mikhail Gabral in Cape Verde. Spiritual, moral greatness connected to vision and courage. My own philosophical view about this thing is I think that we as a species are wretched. That's right, not wretched, wretched. And I know a lot of my secular comrades come down on me on this. You say, well, we human beings, we're really not that bad. We just don't get a chance to manifest our greatness too much. I said, we've had many thousands of years to try to manifest that. And Hegel is right when he says history's a slaughter bench and a slaughterhouse. But Edwin Gibbon is right when he said most of history's nothing but the human register of follies and crimes. Sophocles is right. That beautiful quarrel in Antigone. The wretchedness of we humans alongside the wonderfulness of we humans. And of course, when you get to America, America's the only empire among the 70 empires is what? Believes itself to be innocent. Now, that's a sign of an infantile mentality. Melville understood it in Moby Dick. F. Scott Fitzgerald understood it in The Great Gatsby. Americans always believe in the green light. Tomorrow, everything's going to be better. We solve every problem, every constraint. Nothing can hold us. How come? Because we are Americans. Really? What about Lithuanians? They don't have it. Ooh. Really? Ask indigenous peoples about that. Ask working peoples crushed by greedy bosses. Ask black folk enslaved and then neo-slavery for another 100 years, and then mass incarceration, and then hoods, and inadequate housing. No access to full-scale health care. Human beings are human beings, every nation, every empire. Most of human history is the history of organized greed, weaponized hatred, institutionalized indifference toward the vulnerable, which means histories of domination and oppression. Our precious Jewish brothers and sisters, ask them that for 2,500 years of being terrorized and traumatized. And then ask our Palestinian brothers and sisters, terrorized and traumatized by the folk who were terrorized and traumatized. Or Liberia, black folk enslaved. Create a country in the image of America and subordinate the indigenous peoples. Ooh, sounds like Canada. Sounds like New Zealand. Sounds like Australia. Sounds like the USA. Not even a function of skin pigmentation. It's a human thing. It cuts deep. And that's why the music is so important. That's why black music has in many ways played a much more important role than any other factor in terms of staying in contact with the humanity of black people. If it had been White House, Supreme Court, Congress, schools, it was the music that made it possible for people to understand. Lo and behold, these non-literate enslaved Africans singing sweet, low, sweet chariot that touches every string of my heart. That's human at the deepest level. And we know hip-hop itself is a creative manifestation when you do away with all the musical programs in cities, especially New York City. So you no longer know how to play the instruments. You don't get a chance to listen closely to the pronunciations of a Carmen McRae or Nat King Cole. And so you got to sample the music, but you can't ever suppress black genius and black talent. So what you gonna do, African Bambaataa? What you gonna do, Carry Us One? What you gonna do? Ooh, we got a kinetic orality. We got a passionate physicality. We got a combative spirituality that's gonna keep the beat and keep the polyrhythms and keep the syncopation going in relation to the sampling. Who you gonna sample? We gonna start off with Cheek, but we gonna get to James Brown and George Clinton soon. Of course, Snoop gonna get to the dramatics because his mama was in love with Ron Banks and DJ Reynolds. But he's connected to the best of a tradition of a great people. And there's a wonderful song by the princess of gospel. Her name is Shirley Caesar. One of the great moments in my life was be on stage and do a show with her many years ago. Remember the Caravans, led by Albertina Walker. She used to sing a song called No Coward Soldier. God can't use, God can't have no coward soldier. Courage, perseverance, willingness to take a risk, to cut against the grain, not just to fit in. Mary Ellen Pleasant, the godmother of human rights in California, who gave John Brown $750,000 in 1857. She's the first black woman multi-millionaire. She founded centers for poor people all throughout California. Daniel Glover lives right across the street from the park named after her. Mary Ellen Pleasant. She used to begin every talk in the rich tradition of a great black people, which is I'd rather be a corpse than a coward. Martin picked it up and said, I'd rather be dead than afraid. There's 365 references in the Bible for what? Be not afraid. And it's no accident in the history of this empire that the end and aim of poor people and working people and black folk and other subjugated people is to keep them afraid. Fear is the major means by which you keep folk afraid. And they zero in on black folk in a very distinctive way. And that's how you niggerize the people. To keep them so scared and afraid and intimidated that they don't straighten their backs up and really raise their voices rather than just their echo, and organize and mobilize and be willing to take a risk. But no, if you keep them laughing when it ain't funny and scratching when it don't itch, and get black folk to always have to put on their mask when they go out into the larger white society because they don't want to be true to what's deep inside of them, because if they do, that's going to be marginalized and degraded. That's how you keep a folk scared, fearful. Same thing to women. Same thing to our precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters and precious trans. Keep them scared, don't want to be yourself. Thank God for your ministry, brother. They walk into your ministry and they say, that is a Jesus-loving free black man who wants me to be courageous enough to examine myself, wrestle with my own fears, anxieties, and insecurities, and then emerge a stronger, more powerful force for good for the beloved community. And believe you me, in the next 4 years, people are going to be looking at your ministry much more closely than before. Because for so long we've been a canary in the mine, a voice crying in the wilderness. Now all the gangsterism of Trump is manifest, and not just him, but his cronies. Not just his cronies, but those who are so often not willing to be honest about the effects of gangsterization. And never confuse the difference between a hypocrite and a gangster. Because, the Democratic Party is so milquetoast and mediocre and leaderless and rudderless. Well, we won't even get into that right now. And they've got their own forms of gangsterization in terms of their authorization of genocide of our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza, what's going on in Sudan. Oh, Democratic Party got their problems. But Trump is raw gangsterization. Explicit. He's not a hypocrite, he's a gangster. Hypocrisy is the tribute that vice plays to virtue. When you're a hypocrite, you know what the standards are, you know what the virtues are, you're just violating them all the time. When you're a gangster, you have no standards. You have no virtues. You say anything, do anything, think you can get away with it, and when you can't get away with it, you lie, you bring in other folk to hide and conceal your gangster activity and want to disguise it as virtue. Redefine greatness. What is greatness? Domination, conquest, contempt, hostility, hatred. Really? I come from a great tradition of a great black folk that says, he or she is greatest among you will be your servant, will learn how to love and serve others and keep track of the least of these and find joy in serving others. That's what greatness is, moral, spiritual greatness. Every culture, every empire, for the most part, wrestling with the difference between gangster greatness and spiritual greatness. Every empire has to decide. And at the very moment, the gangster conception of greatness is seemingly in the driver's seat. We'll see how long, because every gangsterized leadership turns on each other. the cannibalism is going to set in very soon. Oh, yeah. I mean, Bannon and Moss already punching it out like Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. Trump can't stand any competition given his insecure ego. The internal strife, internal conflict among the gangster class will set in. The question will be, do we have enough people who have got their hearts and souls together and won't be coward soldiers, but all-seasoned soldiers with a humility and a tenacity willing to organize across the board and create this moments of interruption with the longer historical tendencies of greed and hatred and domination? That's all we have as a species. Moments of interruption. That's why a grin and a hug makes a difference. That's why I joke like Richard Pryor, full of love. We got a lot of black comedians out here don't have as much love as Richard Pryor in their jokes, but we ain't gonna get into that right now. You go to a club these days, you sit on the first row, they talk about you like a dog, you want to go up there and slap them upside the head. Richard Pryor never laughed at black people, he laughed with black people. Black, don't put folk down. That's part of the tendencies, and it affects black America like any other community. But historically, the black freedom movement has been leavened in the American democratic loaf. And when black people love freedom, joining the Union Army to break the back of the Confederate Army in the 1960s, could have had another civil war. Thank God for Rosa Parks and Ella Baker and Martin King and James Lawson and others, with help from the Quakers, to create a moment of democracy ain't nothing but a moment of interruption in the history of non-democratic and anti-democratic regimes going back to the beginnings of the species. And it doesn't last forever. You got to fight for it, sacrifice for it, truth tell, justice seek for it. And in the end, there is still no guarantee. And so as we begin our dialogue, our challenge here is to keep our humanity, humor, sadness, unbelievable dim and grim moment in mind, but never allow any form of catastrophe to have the last word. The last word is always one of moral courage and very genuine compassion that focuses on those Sly Stone call everyday people. Thank you so very much. We'll start out.
What is it, and this is under the category of blackness if y'all are taking notes, what is it about our plight and predicament as black folks, specifically within the context of the U.S., that allowed for our struggle to include justice for everyone while still being unapologetic and having an unwavering commitment to issues that disproportionately affect black folks? What is it about us that produces that kind of work?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that formulation and introductory context, though, brother.
Thank you.
So much depends, it seems to me, on what it means to accent the best as opposed to the worst. Every community has its own forms of idolatry. And the major idols of the modern world have been the nation state and nationalism. That's what people are willing to live and die for. It's been the market. That's what people are willing to live for. Market-driven, money-oriented. And the third has been this very truncated conception of success that pushes out forms of spirit and morality having to do with integrity, honesty, decency. And the product of that is a nihilism. And to put it in language of my own church tradition, it's the obsession with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. Just do anything and say anything to get over, to be successful. Just don't get caught. Survival of the slickest, to revise Charles Darwin. So that the hustle, the gangster sensibility, defined in different ways in different contexts, that becomes dominant. I give you a good example of this. You see that, in the black tradition, you were right to go beyond critique, because critique is just a form of weaponry coming out of the 6th chapter of Ephesians. If all you're doing is being critical of something, you end up being the parasite and they being the host. You see? So if all black folk did was just be critical of white folk, then you're not going to get a Curtis Mayfield. You just upset with Pat Boone. Y'all see the point I'm making? Curtis got to fall back on the genius and creativity of his own community, people, and tradition, and that's not a parasite on what's going on in the community that produced the Beach Boys. God bless the Beach Boys and Bruce Wilson and all of them, you know. But I'm not going to their party. I'm going to James Brown's party. I'm going to Dyke and the Blazers. I'm going to Lakeside. I'm going to the Ohio Players party. Why? Because that music is not a parasite on somebody else's music. It's in conversation maybe with the music. It's using European instruments like John Coltrane on the instrument created by Adolph Sax in Belgium in 1848, the saxophone, or the piano of a Father Hines or Thelonious Monk, but they playing it like no European ever conceived of playing it. That's true for James Cleveland in the church too. That's a rich African tradition that in the New World has been in conversation with other traditions. So the critique is real, but the construction and the creativity, that's what your church is about in that great tradition. But to do that in the 21st century is very different than doing that in the 1960s, let's say, when Train was doing it, because we got different circumstances and conditions. But in addition to that, I would also want to say that there's got to be a centrality on the spiritual and the moral, which embraces all of humanity. It is universal. It is international. It's not narrowly nationalistic. It's not a truncated tribalism. But when people are highly fearful, they fall back into those forms that they think can protect them. And the nation state, that's the only thing that can protect us. We need more police. We need a bigger army. We need a bigger navy. Do you think that your safety will be thoroughly predicated on a nation's army if that army is crushing other people? Don't you think sooner or later there's going to be some response? Too narrow. Same is true with the tribalism. But it's a natural response, but it's not a spiritual and moral response. So people say to Martin King, love warrior at the highest height. Malcolm X. What did James Baldwin say about Malcolm X? He was the most gentle and tenderest man I ever met. Now seeing from the white mainstream, Malcolm X being tender, gentle, what Malcolm X are they talking about? Well, we're not talking about Mike Wallace in 60 Minutes. The hate that produced hate. No, he's got a love on the chocolate side of town that is overflowing like the Baal Shem Tov in the Jewish community in the 18th century. Now, it took Malcolm a while for the love on the chocolate side to spill over to the vanilla side. I grant you that. You know, he was wrong when he said our white brothers and sisters are devils. But of course, he was saying, they got so much devilish behavior over there that I might as well make the ontological shift and say, they're not just devilish, they devils. Give me some counter evidence. here come a Quaker. Here come some Quakers. Here come John Brown. What did Malcolm say about John Brown? Yeah, you know, I think John Brown meets my criteria. I got to broaden. He loved black folks so much he was willing to die with his sons. That means he loved black folk more than many black people love themselves. How many black people willing to die for black people? Serious. But for every John Brown, you got millions of cousins who didn't get the same memo. Meaning what then? Meaning that, again, it's the best up with the embrace of all of humanity. You see, that's Toni Morrison's Beloved. That's James Baldwin's love-soaked essays, embracing all of humanity. But the problem in a white supremacist world, in a white supremacist nation, is so often when you say everybody, you don't include black people. So it's easy to end up with highly successful black folk who love everybody but black people. And they get embraced by the white mainstream. That's the one we like. He keeps talking about his love for John McGillicuddy and won't say a mumbling word about Jamal and Ray Ray and Janiqua. But if you start off loving black folk, then there's a very good chance that you embrace everybody. Now, of course, our indigenous brothers and sisters, we must never, ever marginalize them in our discourse, or Asians, anybody else. But in America, the black-white divide is cut so deep that it's easy to forget about indigenous peoples because they haven't had the same ability to play in shaping the larger destiny of the cultural and intellectual life of the country, yet they are as rich, as deep, as decent, as crucial. And believe you me, in the next 10 to 15, 20 years, that's going to become even more pressing because as America has to confront the whole truth about itself, it won't just be black people or the democratic deficit if we deal with black people, we finally come to terms with American democracy. No. You stole people's land and you engaged in genocide at the very beginning. Then you brought the African folk and so thoroughly exploited and degraded them. But you also exploited the white workers from Italy and Eastern Europe and Wales and Ireland and so forth. Then you degraded to women with the vicious forms of patriarchy. We can go on and on. Keeping track of any human being, all made in the image of a loving and a great God who gave them a sanctity and a dignity that the world can never take away.
Wow. That's category 1 of blackness. I love it. I love it. You know, I want to be so formal pastorally, but I just want to act like nobody's here and just like chop it up with you. Yeah, I just want to chop it up.
Absolutely, brother.
But I want to move us to the Black Prophetic Imagination for the Cultural Soul Project is blackness, the Black Church, Black liberation theology, and prophetic hip hop theory. And prophetic hip hop theory is another core pillar of our church. And so I want us to think about the historical development of the Black church because oftentimes so many people think about the Black church, they think about the patriarchy, they think about the homophobia, they think about the prosperity gospel, they think about all these things, which it deserves a lot of mainstream Black institutions deserve some critique as well. But when I talk about the historical development of the Black church, I'm talking about its prophetic sensibilities and actually where it started. So here's my question. Under the category of the historical development of the Black church, given that this current generation of Black folks don't attend church as frequently as their elders, that's a fact. This current generation of Black folks, they do not attend church as frequently as their elders. And when they do, it's often within a context influenced by prosperity gospel or more narrow theological understandings of scripture and ministry. So the question is, what do you think we should do to preserve, what can we preserve from the Black church's revolutionary beginnings to maximize that hope, that possibility, and that transformation? Again, what can we borrow and maintain and keep alive from the historical development of the Black church that can give us the highest probability of hope, possibility, and transformation?
Yeah, I appreciate these powerful questions, though, brother. I really do. I think first we have to make relative judgments. That we know the Black church has a tremendous amount of limitations and shortcomings in terms of patriarchy, homophobia, and so on. But it historically connected the formation of souls with the building of Black institutions. Now, when you ask the critics of the Black church, okay, you went off, what institutions have you created?
Yes.
Have you been able to create contexts that shape souls of Black people? Even if you're a musician, you don't create the conditions under which you produce and circulate and consume for the most part. And when you do, you are still obsessed with what the market says. So, see, in a capitalist society, no matter what you claim, you could be independent label, independent media. If all you're concerned about is people consuming your product, if all you're concerned about is eyeballs, the market is still the fundamental measure of your success.
That's right.
So that for all of the critique of the Black church, it's no accident. When you ask some of the great musicians, politicians, folk ain't got nothing to do with the church, where's your funeral going to take place? Isn't that the last act of dignity that you want in relation to who you are? You got to go right back to the Black church. When I'm working with the Black Panther Party, every issue, we used to have a handkerchief head, Nigger of the week. Every issue. And it was always a Black preacher. And I used to tell the brothers and sisters, wait a minute now. I know these preachers out here. We got some real gangsters out here. You know, they press prosperity gospel. They reduce the blood at the cross, just a little thin Kool-Aid. So you want to just dip in to get your blessing rather than be transformed and be a blessing. Obsessed with being a mega church, but don't have a whole lot of mega courage and mega love. You got the biggest church in town, but your prison ministry is weak as priest weed and Kool-Aid. You're building fun, and your pastor's wardrobe spending more money than for the elderly. That ain't church. That ain't the gospel. That's just a building being used. But when the Black Panther Party decided to create their magnificent wave of social services to Black people, where did they go? I worked in the breakfast program for 7 years with the Black Panther Party. It was in the churches. They had to come right back. Sometimes they had to come right back and ask the same handkerchief head, Nigger of the week, whether they can use your church for the prison program. You know, Reverend Johnson said, yeah, you know, y'all hit me hard. I know that, but folk in my church told me that I can't say no to these Black Panthers, even though y'all so atheistic and secular. Come on and use my church. All I'm saying is, when you have institutions that have been created over time and sustained in the face of overwhelming adversity, that's an achievement, even given the critique that you have. And all of those Black artists, especially the musicians, 98% of them come out of the church anyway. Now, Billie Holiday, we know she didn't. God bless her. She's one of the greatest of the greatest. And she's, you know, she's our dear street sister, dealing with the brothels and everything. Love you, Billie. She Catholic when she got to church. Love you, Billie. But here comes Sarah out of Mount Zion Baptist Church. Here come Ashford and Simpson out of White Rock Baptist Church in Harlem. Here come Count Basie out of Calvary Baptist Church of Red Bank, New Jersey. We can go on and on. Coltrane's out of AME Zion. We can go on and on and on and on and on. Luther, Church, Anita Baker, Hartford Memorial, Detroit. We can go on and on. So all of the products of that institution, no matter what its limitations, have been dishing out to the world as international treasures. That laboratory was there. And so I don't believe that we ever ought to stop critiquing, because self-criticism ought to be a sign of a human being, let alone a Christian. Every Christian ought to acknowledge, I have fallen short. I'm just trying to love my crooked neighbor with my crooked heart. That's W.H. Auden. He's right. That's what it is to be a Christian. Now we're in a situation where we're being pushed back on black institutions and black infrastructure. DEI now viciously used as a sign of attacking black people. What you gonna do? You got to fall back on your tradition of creating institutions, infrastructures, communities, networks. But what is the benchmark of creating any institution or infrastructure or network? It is trust. You see, once the trust is shattered, you can't have an institution. Nobody trusts each other. Nobody trusts each other. You see the deacon go back after the offering and say, now is Deacon Jones going to keep all that money or put some in his pocket? That's something I never even thought of at Shiloh Baptist Church when I was growing up, because my father was a deacon and Dad was an honest man. He wasn't a god or a deity. He was an honest man. You can give him all the money you want, and he's going to be true to the interests of the community. Nowadays, it's hard to generate that kind of trust. And trust is an intangible thing, but it is a prerequisite of any kind of network, community, institution, and infrastructure. You can't have a business if you have business folks don't trust them. But we had more of that then. Yes, we were broke as the Ten Commandments financially. We were rich spiritually and culturally. Now we got folk, middle class, with a whole lot of money and hardly generate major black institutions at all. At all. What does that mean? You know, you can't sustain a culture with just peacocks walking around telling the world how successful they are. Sure can't. Peacocks strut because they can't fly. My everyday people coming out of Shiloh Baptist Church, they may not have gone to college, but they produce eagles. They fly with nobility and style, and they look low and put your back on the back. You ain't heavy, you my brother. You ain't heavy, you my sister. I'm lifting as I climb. And so many of the highly successful black folk wouldn't be in their positions if it were not for those everyday people who produce them, generating eagles. And now you're going to produce just these peacocks walking around with foliage. Where's your fruit? I'm not impressed with foliage, all your colors and so forth. Where's your fruit? And for Christians, by your fruits, you shall know them. Is that right? That's what my Bible says. What is the fruit? Joy, courage, not being afraid, love, and even deeper than justice, brother. When Reinhold Niebuhr says, any justice, it's only justice, soon degenerates into something less than justice. You need love. Love and justice are indivisible, but not identical. You need mercy. Mercy and justice, indivisible, not identical. We go back and read Shakespeare on mercy and Merchant of Venice. Mercy cuts deeper than justice. Love cuts deeper than justice, but love embraces justice. Mercy embraces justice. And one of the reasons, and I'll stop on this, one of the reasons why you could tell our own black culture has been in such a deep spiritual crisis, because there was a time when more of our black people specialized in gentleness and kindness and sweetness. Try a little
Tenderness.
Tenderness, says the genius from Macon, Georgia, Otis Redding. It's not just a song. Even Roney is a tenderoni for Babyface and Bobby Brown. That's not just a song. Soulfulness. I love the Soul Project. What is soul? Well, one of the things soul is the sharing of a soothing sweetness for a people wrestling with the bombardment of catastrophe. So that a soulful touch and a soulful song generates a sweetness in the midst of being hated and terrorized and traumatized. And when you end up with a situation with spiritual warfare and cultural warfare, where so many of our precious young folk don't get a chance to really experience enough of the silky soul of tender and sweet and kind music that touches you at your deepest level and slows you down so that not just love but your relations can be shot through with a sense of sweetness. So much of the music now is so harsh, so intense. I mean, you get into Brother Genius, Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar, whew, that brother right there, he's in a league of his own because he's so honest and can't. In the hotel hollering, we ain't gonna get into all that now, but Lord.
No, we can get into it.
Kendrick's Lord, and then that mortal man at the end with the dialogue with Tupac. I was blessed to teach Tupac. He was on the front row of my classes that I taught in National Black United Front every Wednesday for 3 years. He and Finney, his mother, who was a member of the Black Panther Party and a member of the House of Lord Pentecostal Church of the great Reverend Daltrey. I can see Tupac right now with those big, beautiful eyes before he went to Baltimore. And that dialogue that Kendrick has with Tupac, because there ain't no Kendrick without Tupac. Y'all know that. Yeah. Just like there's no Coltrane without Johnny Hodges. No Aretha Franklin without Marion Williams. We go on no Luther without a whole lot of folk. It could be Russell Tompkins Jr. of Stylistics. It could be Ted Mills of Blue Magic. It could be Eddie Holmes, who had one song, Hey There Lonely, something, something, something. With that wonderful falsetto that Russell Tompkins Jr. of Stylistics also takes to the same place. And of course, that's who Kendrick Lamar is named after, Eddie Kendricks, with his falsetto of The Temptations.
That's right.
Led by the genius from Why Not, Mississippi, named David Ruffin. Motown. Rich tradition. Kendricks brings all of that tradition to bear, but dealing with trauma, sorrow in the present context at the highest level of hip-hop genius.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And Tupac, of course, is what? He asked Tupac about the younger generation. Y'all remember how how that song ends? Silence. You remember how that ends? Mortal Man?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that thing hit me so. I had to run and grab my cognac and Bible at the same time.
I
didn't know what to do. I said, Lord have mercy.
Dr. West.
Tupac, say something, brother. How do you read that moment, man?
Well, one is, I believe that's the song on To Pimp a Butterfly. I think it's the last one on To Pimp a Butterfly. Okay, so, oh my gosh, I do not want to get sidetracked talking about Kendrick because I have so much to say. I have so much to say.
You let your genius.
Okay, so I want to say a couple things.
Yeah.
One is we have 20 more minutes. Okay, so let me just put time out.
We just let it flow.
Let's let it flow. Are y'all okay if we let it flow just a little bit? Are y'all all right? Okay, so we'll let it flow. So I think Kendrick is the most genius artist of this generation, hip-hop art. I think you can even expand him past, just hip-hop. I think his influence, his creativity, his genius, the way he's so unapologetic, the way he's so real. And I also like the fact that when Kendrick doesn't oversaturate himself in the media and all those kind of things, he shows up to do the art. He's really committed to the art. I think one of the most creative albums of all time. I have 3 top creative albums of all time from hip hop, and I think To Pimp a Butterfly is one of the 3. I think The Love Below by Andre 3000 is another one, just in terms of the creativity. And I hate to say this, y'all. Tay, you know who I'm about to say. I hate to say this because he's embarrassing himself so much, but I think My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy in terms of what Kanye was doing back creatively, you know. But no, I'm saying back then, y'all, we know the brother got problems. I hate to even bring him up now. I hate to bring him up.
But geniuses have a right to be thoroughly confused.
Man, you know, and he's absolutely confused. And I think if you would have asked me this a couple months ago, I would say he's perilously close. But I think he's reached the point of I don't even think people are going to understand and respect what he did prior because of some of his antics and behaviors, and I think that's a sad case. But I want to ask you a question. I want to say a few things. One is, in our Bible study earlier this week, we were talking about there can be no transformation without truth, and I loved how you talked about truth.
Yes,
if you need transformation can't happen without truth, and change can't happen without self-reflection and introspective analysis. And what's funny is you started talking about you will know them by their fruits, and you started talking about the fruits of the Spirit that Paul so eloquently articulated in Galatians. The funny thing is I just didn't have time to talk about it today in terms of our content. I want to just go over the fruits of the Spirit for people here that may be familiar. You may know a couple. My mom gets mad, Dr. West, because I read out of the New Living Translation, and she reads out of King James Version.
I'm with you. I
know,
like
so
the
she
King
gets mad
James.
at me.
I'm not crazy about the monarchs, but I like King James Version. I'm with you on that,
and one
sister.
of the biggest things she gets mad at me about is in New Living Translation, one of the fruits of the Spirit is not long suffering. It uses the word patience. And so my mom doesn't like patience. She was like, it's long suffering.
But you agree with that, though?
Yo, 100%. 100%.
That's true. And the poetry, it's a poetic text. So speaking to soul, it's not just language speaking in a prosaic form. But go right ahead.
I want to give the fruits of the Spirit, and then I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to move from Black liberation theology for time's sake and get into prophetic hip-hop theory. But when you're talking about the fruits of the Spirit, Paul's articulating love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those are how you know people. The renewing of the mind, the transformation of the spirit. How do you know? Those are the things. I want to share prophetic hip-hop theory and get to this question because I think it really leans on a lot of what you said about the work of Kendrick Lamar, specifically To Pimp a Butterfly. Here's the quick context. So one of the most amazing academic books ever written on hip-hop was written in the mid-90s by one of your former mentees, Trisha Rose, Black Noise. Black Noise is just such a phenomenal book. And she kind of frames what hip-hop is or how it emerged. And she says, it's life on the margins of post-industrial America. It's situated at the crossroads of lack and desire. It emerges from the deindustrialization meltdown where social alienation, prophetic imagination, and yearning intersect. She says it attempts to negotiate the experiences of marginalization, brutally truncated opportunity, and oppression. So when the Cultural Soul Project talks about hip hop, we're talking about it in its cultural art form, not necessarily in like just rap music. It's a whole art form in terms of how we make sense of meaning, being, and purpose, and how we formulate identity under different social, structural, psychological marginalization. One of the things that I think black folks are constantly have been in quest of, at least from a lot of generations, is identity. Dr. West, here's something that I find interesting. On my mom's birth certificate, under ethnicity or whatever, it says colored. On mine, and I was born in the 70s, earlier part of the 70s, it says Negro. On my younger brother, who's 6 years younger than me, who's also born in the 70s, it says black. And on both my sons, it says African American. You talk about trying to find identity from generation to generation, decade to decade. And so out of this, I kind of started to think about, I created this prophetic hip hop theory. And one of the things I talk about prophetic hip hop theory is at the Cultural Soul Project, we have a deep concern with how marginalized populations formulate and negotiate identity under structural marginalization, social marginalization, psychological marginalization. Here's the question for you, and it's a deep one. What would you say to people who are still struggling to see how hip hop and the church can form that symbiotic relationship I talked about earlier in our church's definition of the Black Prophetic Imagination, specifically around their inability to see hip hop as offering anything but a degrading and dysfunctional form of black culture popularized and commodified by white interest and fascination?
Thank you, my brother. And I appreciate you all's patience, too. I know you've been here a good while, though, but this is just so rich for me. I think the important thing to keep in mind is that our sense of history requires that we recognize that this is not the first time that there's been this kind of challenge of a new black musical art form to the black church, even though that art form is still in many ways a product of it because of its connection to the larger black musical tradition. Thomas Dorsey wrote 91 songs for Ma Rainey. Ma Rainey was one of the greatest artists in the 20th century. She was the first great blues singer. Most of the first wave of blues singers were women, Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith and others. And then his wife and baby died the same day. And he rediscovered his Christian faith. And he went to Pilgrim's Baptist Church in Chicago. And he wrote over 2,000 gospel songs, including Martin Luther King Jr.'s favorite of all time, Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. Now, Ma Rainey was viewed as devil's music at that time for the black church. So Pilgrim's Baptist Church with Julius Caesar Austin. Julius Caesar Austin was known as the first kind of break-dancing preacher. He'd make MC Hammer look like a Boy Scout almost because he'd be moving and things. That's right. Like Manuel Scott Sr. Out of Texas, who's one of the greatest preachers too, but they always moving like this, and people used to line up for hours and hours. They had Thomas Dorsey on the piano, who was singing in the microphone, Mahalia Jackson. But they were singing gospel songs that were different than the old hymns, and so you had an internal struggle in the church because the old hymn-centered churches were saying that this music was catering to the poor folk from Mississippi, because south side of Chicago is Mississippi North for the most part. All of that black genius from the Delta and Mississippi going into Chicago, and they playing this music in the church, blues music in the church. Oh, shucks. You got a theological battle going on, because the blues was viewed as what? Devil's music. And why did they view it as a devil's music? Well, the blues was played in clubs and things where
Juke joints.
There was a whole lot of things going on. Jesus ain't gonna break dance about. You know what I mean? Not treating people right, manipulation, domination, and so forth and so on. But there's a lot of love in those juke joints too. I remember the first time I saw Kirk Franklin. He was part of the program NAACP. He was out of Texas. Fort Worth, 17 years old, bringing hip hop. Everybody upset. Oh my God! I remember first seeing DJ Hollywood at the Apollo every Wednesday night. They bring him out just to introduce folk. 1975. This is 4 years before 1979 with Sugar Hill Gang. And everybody was wondering, what in the world is going on with all this hip hop? How come they don't just sing a song? Well, they got their own way of expressing themselves. Thomas Dorsey had his own way of expressing himself. Same tradition, different kind of breakthrough, but still very much pietistic, pulling from the music of before, in conversation with the sounds and voices before. And, of course, these last 45 years has been, the greatest genre breakthrough in the history of the globe. So for churches to somehow deny that kind of breakthrough in shaping and Afro-Americanizing the youth of the globe, the way jazz had that kind of impact in the 20s and 30s and 40s, but not the same scope and depth. Introduce that history is a way of keeping track of this greatest tradition that I talked about in terms of black music and the ways in which it reiterates itself, reshapes itself over time and space. And sound is sound. The voice itself is an instrument against other instruments. And physical instruments often ascend to the condition of the sound of the human voice. And so it's a collective response and a collective performance. And so I would say to the churches that, they've got to wake up, especially if they're going to speak to the hearts and minds and souls of our precious, precious young folk. And you've been one of the most courageous and visionary and grandest of those who have been doing this. And of course, you're not completely alone. There's been some other folks trying to do that. But it's just a beautiful thing to see the tradition go on, because the very fact that black people are still around in our right minds is a magnificent spiritual achievement. It really is. It's a hell of an achievement just to still be here, and then to go on and produce sounds that the whole world has to come to terms with, and then to create styles of walking and talking and engaging folk that the young folk want to imitate and emulate no matter how much money they have all around the world, not just in vanilla America. What is going on? It's not a function of skin pigmentation. It's a function of a people with a black skin who have been so thoroughly targeted such that they've had to respond creatively at our best. Now, we got a long history of black folk who can't sing, long history of black cowards, long history of black gangsters, long history of black thugs, long history of black sellouts. That's part of black history, too. When you talk about black history, you can't just talk about the good stuff. You got to talk about the bad stuff. Preachers not acting right, deacons on looking for money. We go on and on and on. But when it comes to the best of black folk, they say, "Oh, Brother West, you just saying that because you black." Well, I thank God that I came out of Irene B. West's womb a black man. Now, I was born a Negro. You're right about that. I got Negro on mine. The Negroes on yours, too. But we Africans in the New World with different names in search of an identity. And what is identity? Let us be very clear. Every human being needs identity. What is it? A desire for protection, a desire for association, and a desire for recognition. No human being makes it from womb to tomb without protection, beginning in the womb. You started right in the precious womb of Sister Peggy. Unbelievable protection. All that love coming at you biologically, chemically, physiologically, and everything else before you were even dropped. Isn't that a beautiful thing? We could write a new song right here just on that.
Right.
You know, but then you got to have association. Who can you associate with? Who can you belong with? You can trust. That's what gang life is about on the streets.
Yeah.
That's what the gang in the White House is about. They're trying to protect their interests, ruling class, wealthy, billionaires, some sense of belonging,
Exactly.
which is breaking down daily,
Yep.
and recognition. They want to be recognized for the great patriots that they are. And I say, get off the crack pipe. Get off the crack pipe.
Hey, everybody, Dr. West, oh my goodness. If you would have told me 23 years ago that I'd be pastoring, let alone sitting and having a conversation with Dr. West, I think they was on the crack pipe if they told me something like that.
But you on the Lord's crack pipe.
Man.
Oh, God got a different kind of crack pipe, you see. You can get a natural high, a spiritual high on that pipe.
Man, amen.
Turn your world
that leads to
upside
spiritual
down.
transformation.
Absolutely.
That leads to spiritual transformation. I'm going to say a couple things, and then I'm going to ask a question, and we're going to get out of here. And the question will be a little bit tighter. But I have so much respect and admiration for you. I shared it in the introduction. But being a person I'm from Portland, and where I got my master's degree, I never had another black person in my class. I think I was the first black male at my college to get a doctorate in their doctoral program. Yeah, there was a newer program, and until somebody tells me I'm wrong, I'm gonna keep saying that. But I'm pretty sure I'm right, though. I'm pretty sure I'm right. And I just remember it could have been so easy to conform to the powers that be, to just get along and all those kind of things. And I was just so provoked and inspired by your work. As an undergrad, I don't even think people heard my own voice. I was just regurgitating everything you said, man. And I knew I finally had some really transformative thoughts of my own, is when I could come to some conclusions on some ideas without reading you, but you were saying the same thing. I'm like, yes, I'm finally kind of getting there, with Dr. West. So I just want to say this to you publicly. I've said it to you privately. There's no Dr. Glenn without Cornel West. There's no Cultural Soul Project without Dr. West. There's no, I'm just not the person that I am without your work, your witness, your courage, your sense of, we were talking about this when I picked Dr. West up. My orientation about calling is, we talk about this in Bible study, calling is about, first and foremost, how do you honor and glorify God? And then the next thing is, how do you bless others? Calling is never about you. It's never about the individual. You can go through the Bible. If anybody says they're called to do something and they're the only one primarily benefit from it, that is not calling at all. And a lot of people, I just want to say this, I can preach this later, but a lot of people walking around like a peacock talking about, I got God's favor on me. I'm like, you got God's grace on you. That is not favor. And what is grace? Grace is not received. Grace is getting something that you don't deserve. That's right. And mercy is not getting something, punishment you do deserve. And we're walking in mercy and we're walking in grace, and people are trying to say it's favor. But your witness, your courage, the superlatives could keep going. I want to ask this question to you. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to give a couple notes. And if Dr. West is willing, I'm going to put him on the spot. We can take some pictures with some people. We got a process to get pictures into people really, really fast, if that's what y'all want to do. But here's the question. The most profound question of the night. Who's your top 5 favorite rappers?
Oh, Lord.
And this isn't
Lord.
Everybody else's. This is your top 5 favorite rappers.
This is my top 5. So you know how fallible my judgment is.
Man.
That's exactly right. Who said that? You understand, brother. He's a John Coltrane of hip-hop. This brother's rapping at 18 years old with a flow and internal rhyme that was unprecedented at the time. Now, Kendrick and them have taken it to heights he knows not of. The way you take what I've been able to transmit to you, the heights I know not of, brother. I'm a cracked vessel. I'm just glad that the Lord could use a cracked vessel like me. Amen. And you working it in context and ways, congregation, and you keep that love and courage, and you got your own style, because you got to be you.
Amen. Authenticity.
Everybody's who they are, not somebody else. And you got to be you. But Rakim was number 1. Tupac and Biggie. Wow, it's hard to distinguish those two, but I would probably have to say Tupac is number 2. Yeah. then Biggie would be number 3. And the rest is commentary. Because I love, Rhapsody, J. Cole. I mean, it's just so many of them. As you know, in my own album, you see, I started out my 3rd album with Talib Kweli. You see, we were in the studio together. We had Andre 3000 on that album, you might remember. And my dearest, heartfelt brother, who I traveled the country with, used to come to my class every year, KRS-One. I was just with DJ Nice just 2 days ago. He's at the Apollo right now, actually, in New York City. He had this gathering during the pandemic, some of you might know about, where he brought so many people in, and he's bringing all of them back to the Apollo right now. So we were just together in L.A. at the radio station. And he and KRS-One, you remember, produced 1989 Self-Destruction, which is one of the great classics as well. But the talent and the genius is just so overwhelming in hip-hop that it's just so very, very difficult. It's like asking me, who are the greatest singers? Well, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, Dinah Washington, and we ain't got the Phyllis Hyman or Gladys Knight or Aretha yet. What do you do? It's overwhelming. The riches are just so overwhelming.
In abundance.
And the same is true with the black male singers, with Johnny Hartman and Luther and Nat King Cole and Curtis and, oh my God, Smokey doing his thing. 85 years old. He's got live residence in Las Vegas right now for a whole year. So he's doing more than just cruising now. He's flourishing and flowering at 85. So I would stop with those 3, but who would you add, though, brother? Kanye, too, is his genius is just, and he's not my cousin, But his genius is undeniable. There's no doubt about that.
So I thought about this because I had the question.
Yes,
and
yes.
I'll go really quickly. Depending on what season, it changes. But right now, my number 1, unapologetically, is Black Thought from the Roots.
Oh, that's true. That's another.
Unapologetic.
Oh, and he was on my album too.
Yeah.
Black Thought is unbelievable.
And I want to say this parenthetically, and I'm gonna swing back to Black Thought. But I was listening to Raheem DeVon's album the other day.
Yeah,
Dr. West has all the interludes and introductions on Raheem DeVon's soul album. It's just beautiful. So I just had to tell you that because I forgot to tell you that earlier. Man. But Black Thought, 100%. Black Thought is my favorite rapper. He's amazing. Ooh. And for the folks who if you don't know who Black Thought is, he's from the rap group The Roots. If you can write this down, and YouTube this, he was on Jimmy Fallon, the Tonight Show the other day, like 2 nights ago, with John Legend, and they just did this remix of I Used to Love You, and they flipped the beat, and Black Thought, I mean, he killed it, man. He killed it. And I made my son watch this. I'm like, watch this. Do you feel something when you watch this? You know what I mean? I was like, man, I'm turned up by this, man. Like, so that genius and that beauty. So I would say, mine right now, Black Thought, number 1. Common, number 2. I love Common. Common's number 2. Common, number 2. And I always go to his live performances, and he's just incredible live. 3rd is Andre 3000. I think what Andre 3000 has done is incredible. Right now, 4th, I would say Kendrick Lamar. I like what Kendrick Lamar is doing. And
do you think Common is better than Kendrick Lamar?
No, but I like him.
Oh, but just how you like him?
I like Common. No.
We call Common up tonight and say, brother, we love you to death.
No.
Compton's in the house.
I'm going to tell you something. No, I'm going to tell you something. See, when you talk about jazz and the blues and how it formed you, I was shaped by hip-hop, right? Like, I'm shaped by hip-hop. And so I'm listening to hip-hop in the 80s and 90s where it's constantly changing and it has different narratives. Right. So even though I loved NWA, I loved Ice Cube, I loved that presentation and hearing kind of what they were articulating, I didn't find myself in that. I didn't gangbang. I wasn't from Compton. I didn't do all that, right? And so Common, for me, was one of the first rappers that when he started talking about his story, it sounded like my story. And so that's why Common's always going to be where he is. But I would say Kendrick Lamar, and for everybody, I'm probably going to get voted off the island by saying this. I'm not the biggest fan of that his latest album, though. You know what I mean?
Kendrick's?
Yeah, Kendrick's. I think his.
Talking about his car and thing?
Yeah. I think that, I love the sound of what he's trying to do, but I think his most artistic work kind of predates that a little bit. But I would say then my fifth person, I would go J. Cole. And I think J. Cole
is unbelievable.
I think he's
man.
amazing.
Jay's unbelievable. But did you mention Tupac?
No, that's just today.
Oh,
No, listen. I love Pac. No, listen. I love Pac. Listen, this isn't about who I don't like.
Right,
This is just about who's speaking to me. I love Pac, man. I got all Pac.
No, we just talking about ranking. We just talking about ranking.
Me Against the
That's
World
right.
is top 10 hip hop albums of all time.
Lord,
You know what I mean?
Lord,
So
I
it's no diss on Pac.
That's right.
But at the same time, Pac was cut short. Pac died at what, like 25, somewhere around that age.
But Keats was dead.
And then
at 25.
I'm still living, right?
Keats got something to say.
There's still things.
Yes, indeed.
So I would say those are what it is. Before we go, I want to give an applause, and then I want to give some information. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Dr. Cornel West. Before you go, DJ, turn this on 1 second. I want to give a couple, some informative information. One is, if you are inspired, the Spirit has moved you, we are the Cultural Soul Project Church. We do Bible study every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock here. It's transformative. It's called Soul Sessions, a revolutionary Bible study. And we are building and cultivating, beloved, community that's grounded in righteousness and justice. And it's interactive. And the folks that show up, I am just blessed and honored to be in relationship with them weekly. Now we are launching something called Second Sundays. And our first Second Sunday is going to be on Sunday, April 13th, 1:30 p.m. And here's the thing about 1:30. You can't complain that it's too early. You can't say you couldn't eat breakfast. You can sleep in, eat breakfast, go to brunch, do whatever you need to do, and then get your praise and worship on and get your spirit renewed and transformed. If you need to find out anything about the Cultural Soul Project, go to our website, www.theculturalsoulproject.com. It's such a beautiful and intuitive website. I wish more people would visit it, man. It's such a nice website. It's so intuitive. Also, if you're on social media, everything we do is the Cultural Soul Project. Follow us on Instagram. We always put our information there. Let's see, anything else? I'm honored. One more time, give it up for Reedwood Church. They're just a beautiful community. I love what they're doing here to open up their doors to us for our ministry to be here.